Hey, welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast. I am your host, Jackie Tan, and it is so good to have you here today. This podcast is all about human performance, whether that's sports performance or showing up at your best every single day. I chat with experts, athletes, coaches, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We explore the body's incredible ability to heal, adapt, and evolve so you can crush limitations, reconnect your body and mind, and discover your extraordinary potential. And today I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with two incredible clients of mine, Tessa Moorfield and Julian Bennett. Both Tessa and Julian completed the Ultraman back in May, and to have played a very small part in their journey is a real privilege. Tessa is a builder and owner of Moor Living and started triathlons 7 years ago. And if you ask her friends, they will tell you that she's incredibly disciplined, very inspiring, and a very strong runner. Julian is working for the Royal Flying Doctors Service. He is the director with Into Ed Africa Foundation and a youth mentor through RAISE, and only took up triathlons in 2018. Julian has been raising funds for 4 charities very close to him, which you'll hear a little bit more about in today's episode. Having both been coached by world champion Richard Thompson, who was on the show last week. If you haven't heard that one, check it out. It was awesome to hear how much of an impact that he had, obviously not only through the program that he set for them, but the very valuable lessons that they learnt throughout not only the sessions leading up, but also through the days of the events. I am in awe of both Tessa and Julian. Not only are they incredibly disciplined and driven to achieve their goals to the best of their ability, they are incredibly honest and humble about the entire experience. They are good people doing extraordinary things. Enjoy this episode with Tessa Moorfield and Julian Bennett. Tessa and Julian, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast.
Thank you, Jackie.
It's so good to have you both here because I'm working both with you currently in your recovery to the Ultraman Australia. And prior to working with you two, I had never even heard of the Ultraman. And so when I looked it up, I was in complete shock. Firstly, I thought, who on earth would want to put themselves through this? Turns out there's a few of you. And then, of course, I was just in complete awe of you both and just so much respect for what you're doing. For those of you who don't know what the Ultraman is, it is a 3-day event. Day 1 is a 10-kilometre swim followed by a 140k bike ride. Day 2 is a 281.1 kilometre bike ride, and day 3 is an 84.3 kilometre run. That blows my mind just saying it. When you guys hear it back, what goes through your mind when you hear that?
Yeah, it's we've kind of desensitized a little bit, and certainly in terms of the training as well. But yeah, it's huge, and you just when you start to do some just anywhere near that sort of distance, and you know there's hours and hours more to go, that you can occasionally have the moment where it sort of blows your mind a little bit.
We must be getting comfortable with those distances because it doesn't sound as crazy as it did at first.
Yeah, and I guess
true.
because you're just doing so much in your training that doesn't, could it possibly not sound as much because your weeks are so huge?
I think so. There was another part of the Lakers club was doing a 4-hour ride a few weeks ago, and I think we were out doing 7 or 8 hours, and so they were sort of saying this is a really big weekend and make sure you recover more. And then we were off doing a massive run the next day, kind of thing.
Exactly. Huge. Well, tell us about the moment that you actually decided that, yeah, I'll give that a go, give the Ultraman a go.
Well, it was Tessa that mentioned it to me a couple of years ago. And I think I showed sort of faint interest in it. And from then on, she was like, you're doing Ultraman.
Just roped you in.
Yeah, pretty much. But it always, when she first mentioned it, it really sort of triggered something inside of me in terms of that sounds like a massive, exciting and different challenge. And I'd only really just got into sort of Ironman stuff, so I was kind of hooked from that moment, I'd say.
So I first heard about it around 4 years ago when one of our fellow Lakers was doing the event, and one of our friends was out supporting her when she was doing a 10-kilometer ocean swim. And I remember thinking, why would you swim so far that you needed someone to walk alongside you and give nutrition? But from that point on, I was kind of hooked and couldn't let go of the idea, and mentioned it to Julian. Julian was obviously on board straight away. And I supported a friend who was doing it last year, and that sort of cinched the deal until Julian and I did Cairns Ironman last year and caught up in the recovery area, or just outside of the recovery area afterwards, and decided Ultraman was a silly idea and it was all off. So it was off for a period of time. And then on the day Ultraman entries were due to close, we caught up for coffee, and somehow Julian and I left coffee both agreeing to sign up.
So it was then and there you did it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, within sort of 6 hours of a coffee that wasn't about Ultraman. It was just about catching up.
Wow.
All of a sudden we'd signed up again. So, and I think we've probably been questioning ourselves ever since in terms of what the hell were we doing?
Yeah.
Now I bet you're dubious every time you catch up for coffee. You're like, what are we going to leave signed up to next?
I think it's probably more our partners and friends that sort of wonder what's going to happen after a coffee.
Well, Julian, you both mentioned having done, the Ironman distance. Tell us, how long have you guys been training, and what sort of races have you done in the past?
Well, I've only been doing triathlons for about 4 years, and I only did those because of, again, kind of looking for something. It's kind of a very similar story in that a lot of people, I was turning 40, having a few beers with my brother who he does a lot of crazy stuff. And we're like, well, what can we do to sort of celebrate sort of turning 40? And Ironman came up. So we're like, all right, well, let's give ourselves 12 months to train for it. And I, at the time, I was doing sort of bit of sailing and kite surfing and other bits and pieces, but nothing really very serious. And so we said, well, let's give ourselves 12 months and see if we can do an Ironman. So yeah, over that 12 months, him and I made a pact to train to do Cairns Ironman in 2019. So it was almost exactly 4 years to the day. It was around May time that we started. And at the time I remember trying to run around the airport, and it's about 11, 12 Ks. My knees were really, really hurting. And then went for a ride, I think the week after, and got maybe about 40 kilometers. And I was like, what have I done? And so, yeah, we just sort of worked at getting the distances up over that time, and done a variety of different things since then. So I've done 2 official Ironmans with Cairns, and then last year I did, or we were planning to do Busselton in December. And because of COVID, SA was shut out, but thankfully Tri-SA sort of put on what was called a bootleg busso. So we did an Ironman in Adelaide, starting in Henley and finishing up in Semaphore. So that was my sort of third Ironman, and really sort of where I kicked on for Ultraman training.
Yeah, wow. And Tessa, what's your story?
Actually, very similar to Julian's. So it must be the year of 40th. So the year I turned 40 was the year, that was 7 years ago. That was the year that I did my first triathlon. Started my sights were a bit lower than Julian. I firstly did one of the West Lakes, our local triathlons. I can't remember what distance. It was probably one of the shorter ones. And then did the Victor Harbour Olympic distance triathlon. I think maybe a year after that, I did a half Ironman. And then, like Julian, since then, I've done Cairns Ironman twice and the sort of unofficial bootleg Busselton Ironman late last year.
So tell us what do you take from your previous training, coming into this Ultraman? How is there anything sort of physically and mentally that you can draw on from your past experience going into Ultraman?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's a complete, the whole thing for me has been a learning process. Like the first Ironman I just did by myself in terms of training, just worked out, picked up some stuff off the internet in terms of what a training plan would look like. Didn't really, I picked up a coach after that for the second one, so I took it a little bit more seriously. But
can I just ask, like, what was the difference between, like, were you maybe a little shocked at how different the programs potentially was between you having researched something and just doing your own thing and then getting a coach and following that program? Was there a big difference?
Yeah, well, you kind of, when we were getting close to the first one, everybody sort of said, "Who's your coach?" And I was, "Oh, no, I'm just sort of working it out." And I literally had no idea. I had no power meters. I had no idea what heart rate zones were about. Absolutely nothing about nutrition. So I was properly making it up. And so just to have somebody, one with the experience that had done something like that and put plans together, but just beginning to learn more about your body and how it sort of begins to respond in certain situations was that was kind of the really interesting part of getting a coach, was actually that experience and that sort of knowledge of all these different aspects of the sport.
Tessa, what do you draw on from your experience of Ironmans and triathlons and all different distances as well?
You're always learning, so it's constantly a learning experience. I guess we all tend to travel a fair bit for triathlons, so there's a lot of planning and logistics that goes into it, and each time you do it, you get better. And I guess for me, because I did have that evolution from the shorter distances to the longer distances, the amount of planning that goes into it just grows and grows and grows. And all of those learnings have, I suppose, helped with the massive amount of planning that's gone into Ultraman. So there has been a huge amount of planning that's gone into it, but I feel as though we're probably quite well prepared.
That's
having
awesome.
done so many different triathlons and travelled for triathlons before.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into logistics of it soon. But before we do, tell us about your coach and the programming, because, for something so enormous, I can't get my head around the amount of training and programming that goes into something this big. So tell us about all of that.
Yeah, so we picked up a different coach for Ultraman, and my main reason for it was again picking up the experience of somebody who'd gone and done at least an Ultraman. I mean, every coach has a slightly different philosophy. There's a lot of ground elements that are the same and a slightly different approach. But I think we both chose to pick somebody who'd gone through that, so therefore we could learn from their experience, but we could get confidence in that the program that we were being set was specific for what is an extreme endurance event, relative to what most people are training for.
And yeah, you've done a good job in choosing that coach, because He is the world record holder, Richard Thompson. Is that right?
True. Yeah.
Well, I came across Richard after crewing last year for Ultraman, and followed up with a conversation with someone else who'd done Ultraman last year, who also had children of a similar age to mine. So that conversation with her after Ultraman gave me confidence that Richard was someone who, I mean, obviously he's got firsthand experience. He's the world champion of Ultraman, and he's won the Australian World Ultraman before as well. But it gave me the confidence that he would be able to set a training plan that would work for me around my family and around the children. So that was a big part of the reason for touching base with Richard.
And during our sessions, or your recovery sessions with your massages, I think, Tessa, it was you that mentioned you don't actually see what the program is in a week,
Correct.
like a week advance. Like, tell us about that. What goes through your mind when do you receive it? How far in advance? And yeah, all of that.
So typically, Richard will set the training program for the next week on a Saturday, and that will be Sunday through to the following Saturday. I suppose it's fairly last minute, but it does mean that the training that's set is very responsive to the training that we've done in the previous week and how we're coping with fatigue and other life stresses. So I think it's probably crucial to getting through all of this hard training.
Yeah, and so, sorry, just so I understand that,
Yeah.
you receive your program on Saturday or the Sunday?
Usually the Saturday.
The Saturday for tomorrow, for example, the Sunday
right,
going
yes.
forward. Wow. Yeah. So on the Saturday, you've got no idea.
Sunday for the Monday.
Right. So you could go, so tomorrow, for example, you wouldn't know what you're doing until you receive the program.
Correct.
And yeah, go on.
I was going to say early in the process, I think we're around 2 weeks in when I got COVID. And at that point, Richard was setting my program on a daily basis. So I didn't know what I had more than a day out. Usually we were just touching base each day, seeing how I was feeling and working from there.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about a responsive type of training program.
Yeah.
It's incredible. How did you go with COVID?
Well, I had to do all of my training in the house. So I moved my indoor trainer upstairs and I was spending hours and hours and hours on the indoor trainer. And the other thing that I was able to do, because I was 10 days in isolation, was a bit of water running in the pool. So my training for those 10 days was lots of training on the indoor trainer and water running in the pool.
Did you feel like you were I mean, obviously you were affected by COVID, but in terms of, cardiovascular wise, did it have an effect on you that you noticed too much, other than the obvious?
I was pretty lucky, actually. I think my symptoms were very mild, and I had a couple of days of complete rest, and then I think I was able to get back into training after that, with a little bit of fatigue that hung around, but beyond that, I was pretty good.
Yeah, incredible. Well, tell us, what does your training load look like in the heaviest week?
The heaviest week, we're kind of in it now, or just over the hump, I'd say. So we're doing about 25 hours a week, I reckon. Mm-hmm. Heavily loaded to basically 2 days. So for me, it's been the weekend, which will be a long ride of about 8 hours, and then a long run on the Sunday. of about 4 hours. So that's about half of the week. And then through the week, so leading up to the weekend, we'll typically do something similar to the day one of Ultraman. So a long swim and then a ride, a shorter ride, but a ride straight out of the water, as they say. And then through the week, it's a mixture of some tempo runs and some VO2 max bike sessions, but tend to be a bit shorter. And then some lower level kind of recovery, couple of hour bike rides or runs at a slightly lower tempo generally, but building up to that sort of 25 hours a week.
Yeah,
roughly.
wow.
Mix of pool and open water, as well as trainer and out on the road on the bike.
And you mentioned a little bit about recovery, but can you go into a bit more in depth about recovery? Is there anything specific that you have been doing or you found that works?
Well, apart from eating everything we see.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been another sort of massive learning curve through this process. The last 4 months is the recovery part, and the importance of sleep. We've talked about sort of obviously eating and replenishing all of that energy that you're consuming, and then being able to back up day after day has been really important. I am getting into things like massage. I've never really sort of been a big fan of it until this year, but recognizing that there's a whole bunch of things out there that you can do to actually help your body recover and therefore stay strong, but equally not and therefore not sort of wear itself out just with the volume that we're doing.
Anything beyond what Julian said, I get my compression tights on after the harder sessions, and Richard tends to put at least once a week 20 minutes on the foam roller in our program. Yes. And it comes with a note that says, "Do not miss this."
Very good. That's brilliant. Actually, that's just answered my next question, because I was wondering whether there was any direction from Richard, whether, any information or recommendations for recovery that either he does or that he prefers you to do. But yeah, foam rolling.
Yeah, he's a big advocate for certainly the recovery side. So in our chats, it comes up quite a lot. And as Tess says, there's specific sessions that he puts in the plan to make sure we're at least doing something.
That's fantastic. So what do you think, I mean, looking back over this, what has been the best advice from Richard, or from anyone actually, going into, this training and ultimately the Ultraman?
I mean, there's been a lot of sort of small nuggets of gold that just come from somebody who's gone through it. And even from Tess, who's with support crew last year, I think the things you observe through doing that, it all just helps to sort of build up, one, your confidence that you're going to get there, but two, confidence that you're going to enjoy it, I guess.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of very large weekends of training, we've had continual messages from Richard to say, keep eating.
Yeah. Yeah, in case you've forgotten.
Actually, I did get some good advice a couple of months ago, actually, from a psychologist. I was really struggling with the swim. I tend to panic a lot in the open water. And it was very much on my mind heading into Ultraman. And a psychologist said to me, well, it's just a build-up of carbon dioxide. So all you need to do is breathe out, focus on breathing out before you get in the water and as you get started. And it's amazing what a difference that has made for me. So I haven't had a panic attack in the water since she told me that.
Oh, that's wonderful news. Well, that's another thing actually, in terms of, the psychology of it all and your mindset, because again, it's such a huge thing that you're doing, and there's there's a lot of time out there. There's a lot of time to be in your own head and either thinking about the sore foot, knee, or being uncomfortable, or whatever it is. So how have you trained your mind to focus on the goal at hand when your body hurts and everything's just, taking so long?
Yeah, I guess that's been a sort of slightly different. So until we started training for Ultraman specifically, I did a lot of my big rides with a group, and that was more about pushing me. So I was chasing people as much as that. When you want to give up, then you couldn't, because the group was going on up the next hill, so you'd keep going. But important part of this process has been trying to do it on my own. So actually going to train by yourself, so you get used to being by yourself and having to work these things out. A lot of people, there's lots of different places you go in this, and obviously when it gets a bit dark, you want to sort of try and change your mindset. I always thought, I've got hours, I'm going to solve the world's problems out there, and but you can't. Somehow you just can't. You sort of end up doing really sort of basic things like counting to 100, or just something really sort of quite simple, or some simple calculation kind of thing, just to try and get through that sort of that tough point, or focus on where you're heading and how far it is to get there, and then you realize you get a bit closer, and those sorts of more smaller strategies, rather than actually any sort of groundbreaking sort of exploration and creating the next blockbuster movie while sitting on a bike.
Brilliant.
Well, you do go through a lot of different phases in your mind, being out there for so long. I've found that with power targets being set and that kind of thing, I spend a lot of time focusing on that and the targets for each session. But I found that on these longer sessions, towards the end of the session, that can get a bit taxing, and I need to just remind myself of why I'm out there, and look around, enjoy the scenery. If I'm out for a long run, remind myself that I just love running along the esplanade, and love looking out at the ocean when I'm running. So yeah, I need to remind myself of some of those more enjoyable aspects when I get to the end of these longer sessions.
Yeah.
Good point.
And that you have the opportunity to actually be out there and doing it. And
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very lucky that we're able to do it. So yes, you have to bring the mind back to some of those more enjoyable aspects.
Well, I know this is a huge thing. So tell us about your support team and their involvement over the 3 days.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have some amazing people that are going to follow us up and be at our beck and call for at least 3 days.
You got the bell?
Yeah, well, yeah. But I mean, whilst they're going to be there's a huge amount of people in the lead up to this, that even whether it's just been a short conversation or doing small bits and pieces, that there's a whole credit list at the end of this in terms of the people that have really helped out along the way. But the crew that will be there for the event itself basically take everything off our hands. So this is another sort of difference between Ironmans and Ultraman, is that they sort of will look after all of our nutrition, a lot of the navigation, a lot of the preparation for the next day, so we can just go back to that sort of recovery and eating, and all the little activities around the actual racing itself, to make it as easy as possible for us to do what we do. And there's a huge amount of I think Tessa mentioned earlier that sort of logistics of just getting there, but there's a huge amount of logistics just in each day, getting to the start line, getting through the day, and then getting ready for the next day, kind of thing. So yeah, busy little time for the guys that are joining us.
Yeah, and tell us what they're doing on the days. So throughout your swim and bike and run at the day 3.
I've got 3 guys, Pete Caton, Jason, and Graham, that are with me, and ultimately, whilst they'll get us to the start line, so make sure we've got everything and got all the different bags, we'll swim, and when we come back, ultimately they'll give us something to eat and drink. They'll take the wetsuit off. They'll have the bike all ready, so I can just jump on the bike and off I go. And then every sort of half an hour to an hour, they'll be looking to sort of touch base with me. So they'll be following in a car, and handing over more nutrition, checking on what sort of power numbers we're doing, communicating in terms of what sort of how much effort we should be putting in for the next stage, and just managing the day through that whole ride of day 1. And then when we finish, they'll get the bike checked over, they'll get us back to the accommodation, they'll sort out the meals, they'll repack the car for the next day, and then repeat the next day. So we get the bike ready in the morning, we'll ride all day. They'll have all the nutrition and various things we need. We've got a navigator on board that knows where we're going, somebody who is looking after exactly what I'm and Tessa's consuming, and then adjusting in terms of, we'll have a whole array of options to eat and drink in there depending on what we need, and then somebody who's a sort of team captain that's liaising with Ultraman, liaising with Richard as the coach, and whoever else in terms of the things that need doing throughout the day.
That is such a huge responsibility
Mm-hmm.
on them.
Yes, yeah.
And is that easy, letting go of almost that control and just saying, tell me what to do, bring me here, feed me?
You want to say that one, Tess?
Yeah, so we have been advised to completely relinquish control to our crew, and we're both incredibly lucky truly we're incredibly lucky in the particular people that we both have in our crews. So whilst that wouldn't normally come naturally to me, I'm completely comfortable with doing that with the crew that I've got. So in my case, I'll have my husband and my 2 daughters and 2 really good friends. So and both of my friends who are in the support crew are triathletes also, and really have an excellent sort of skill set to help me do what I need to do. And so Julian talked about days 1 and 2, and then day 3 becomes a little different for the support crew, in that whilst they're still following us around in the car, typically one of them will be jumping out of the car and running with us for periods of time. So for the day 3 run, you can have one person with you running at any given time, and they can continually swap out. So in my case, one of my daughters is a bit of a keen runner, so she'll be jumping out to do short sections, not too long. She's only 11. And my other daughter might jump out and do a little bit, and then the rest of the crew will jump out and do whatever distances they're comfortable with. But day 3, I think, will be a lot more social in that sense. We'll have our family and friends running with us side by side.
That's for the entire 84 point whatever K it is. It is. Pretty they can much. Just keep jumping out and running with you. Yeah, yes. Great. And crossing the line, you can cross with them?
Yeah, so the intention is that the whole crew will run the last couple of kilometers along the beach. Yeah. So a few Ks out, they'll go and ditch the car and then meet us as we join the beach, and you got to run along the beach to the finish line at the end. So it's not an easy finish line after 84 Ks, but yeah, they'll all join us for that last last little sprint along the
Oh,
beach.
that sounds sensational. Get
Yeah,
your photo faces on that last bit.
yeah, exactly.
When you think about the day or the days, because there's three of them, what do you feel will be the most challenging, or do you just try not to think about it at all?
Um, day two for sure. I think the back end of day two is an incredibly long day. I'm actually enjoying all three disciplines, but of the three, probably riding's my sort of least favorite. I really enjoy running at the moment, and I'm really enjoying the swimming. So I'm kind of looking forward to those two. Day two is just an incredibly long day in the
Yeah.
saddle, and you're going to get sick of a lot of things. So I think that's where I certainly going to have to dig a lot deeper to get through that one.
Same for me. Day two, the long day on the bike. I think that will be the most challenging for me. I also think with a multi-day event like this, for me, probably getting the rest that I need at the end of each day and overnight will be a big challenge. You can be sort of, I suppose, a bit wired when you finish a big day like that, and we need to go home, somehow get comfortable, get rested, get a good night's rest, and then get up and do a whole lot
Do
of
it all over
other
again.
stuff the next day. So I think that'll be a big challenge as well.
What are you guys looking forward to?
I mean that day three is just going to be amazing. I think, even though it's going to get tough, I think it's going to be so much, so many sort of good vibes out on the course, and having those people around us. I'm just really looking forward to it. I think the whole process from the start to the finish, there's a huge amount of effort and energy, not just from us, but other people that have gone into this. So I just hope so we can just enjoy the event as much as we can, and savor it, because I'm not doing it again.
You've already decided.
Yeah, for now.
Until we
Tessa,
have
what do you
coffee next time.
Yeah,
That's it.
we've got to go bigger next time.
Oh, big call. It's recorded.
I'm really looking forward to day three. So when I think about the event, mostly I'm thinking about day three, and I'm imagining running with the children, my husband for the last bit, my support crew. I'm hanging out for that day. And like Julian said, it's going to be really tough. And I know there'll be times when it may not be fun, but that's the bit that I'm looking forward to, and crossing the finish line.
Yeah.
Julian's going to come back and cross the finish line with me.
Oh, very good. If he can walk.
If he can
He'll be
walk.
crawling.
Yeah.
He'll crawl. Well, this has been wonderful. Firstly, thank you for taking the time to do this, because I know you are both incredibly busy with the training and with work and life. So thank you for doing this. I wish you all the very best, and I'm very much looking forward to chatting with you both post Ultraman. That was the pre-race interview. Now you're going to hear from the both of them post-race. Now, Julian is up first. He was chatting with me only 4 days after the event, and unfortunately they both got COVID on the way back to Adelaide. So Julian was great enough to get through all of that and chat with me post race, and he has some really awesome stories to tell as well. Extraordinarily, he came fourth male overall. Such an extraordinary effort. Enjoy this post race recap with Julian Bennett. Julian, welcome back, and congratulations on becoming an Ultraman.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back.
Firstly, how are you feeling?
Um, Yeah, a bit sore. I've certainly. I don't think the event's sunk in properly, but from a physical perspective, my legs are completely smashed.
Yeah.
A little bit of chafing in places, and yeah, seemed to have picked COVID up on the way home. So
Oh
good and bad timing, I guess.
no.
It's good
Well,
that it's
that's
come after the
it.
event and just before.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, you came fourth overall, Julian. Did you have any idea that that's how this would play out?
The training was going really well. I never went into it with that sort of level of expectation. I did have people around me sort of saying you could be in the mix here, and certainly after day one, I was sitting second, and it was like, wow, this really we could do something quite amazing. So yes and no, I guess. I think I'm really happy with the result, to be up there, and yeah, time wise, the event, the whole experience was just amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's go to day three and finishing. What do you remember of crossing the finish line and how did you feel?
Day three was we just had like torrential rain all day, and I actually, whilst it made it a lot harder, um, it was bizarre because it was an extra challenge. I actually probably enjoyed it more. Um, uh, yeah, there's unfortunately my wife missed because of the weather. My wife missed, or the flights were cancelled, so she didn't get to the finish line in time. So um, uh, other than that, it was just fantastic to know, and we finished strong, body held together, and yeah, then it was time to party.
When did she arrive?
About 5 o'clock that night. So, yeah, it took her about 12 hours to get from Adelaide
Wow.
up to Noosa, when she should have probably picked us up about halfway along the run.
Yeah, yeah. And it really was torrential. I've seen some footage and I mean, I don't know if you experienced this, but I saw people were wading
Yes.
through like knee deep water.
Yeah. It was every I'd say every few hundred meters, but there would have been stretches where it was a bit longer, that you were going through puddles that were at least as deep as your shoe, and then there were spots where you couldn't run because the water was up at least around your calf. And then there's a couple of places where rivers had broken over walkways, and um, it was questionable as to whether we should
Yeah.
have been across it, but it was very wet. It was very, very wet. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. All right, well, take us back to day one. Talk us through how you felt starting and going through the swim and the bike.
Yeah, the swim. So it was actually a really nice morning. There was a little bit of surf, but sort of reasonably calm, not too humid. Um, I I felt in a good space. I kind of was really enjoying my swimming at the time. So it was kind of calm going out there. It's obviously a long swim, and I was reasonably confident that day one was going to be probably the easiest of the 3 days. So I just went out and I just really enjoyed the swim. We had a paddler and we just cruised along, slowly sort of picking people up along the way. Yeah, just loved it.
How what position did you come out of the swim?
So I was third out of the water.
You-
Um, yeah, so there's a couple of guys ahead of me, and there was, I think, a couple that weren't too far behind us, but we sort of obviously went into a quick transition, and then and then onto the bike. And it's a bit difficult to know where you are when you're out there, but there was certainly a point where you're probably about halfway through, and you're sort of swimming, and I was aware of two other swimmers. Like, how can this be possible over this sort of distance that you can be so close after that sort of time? But yeah, I just got into a rhythm, just enjoyed being out there.
And just to give people an idea, it's a 10K swim. How long did that take you?
It's 2 hours and 40 something minutes.
Right. And in that time, are you consuming any nutrition?
Yeah, so we have a paddler that sort of paddles alongside us, and I had a bit of a plan that I'd swim for half an hour, but after that I picked up, so every 15 minutes or so he would shoot off in front of me, and stop, and I would grab a drink bottle and have a bit of a drink of some sort of sports drink every sort of 15 minutes or so. And it's more, obviously there's hydration with that, but it's as much that you're about to get on the bike and do 5+ hours of riding. So you need to be, you definitely don't want to be short on nutrition going into that.
Yeah, exactly. And tell us about the transition, because obviously it's not like an Ironman where you're trying to like make the transition as short and efficient as possible. Like, you're then going on for a 5 hour plus ride. How does that transition work coming out of the water and then into that long ride?
No, it is like an Ironman.
It is? So really quick?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I was in and out of there in less than 2 minutes. So we run at the beach. My crew sort of give me a drink as I was running up there, but it's wetsuit off, helmet on, shoes on, sort a couple of other bits out in terms of food and stuff on the bike, and then you push the bike out and away we go. And they run to the car and try and follow.
Yeah, wow. And how did the bike feel after coming out of the water?
Yeah, pretty good. We've obviously, some of the training we've done has been very much doing a swim session, a long swim session followed by a bike, but you obviously your mouth's like full of, the mouth and tongue sort of are very salty from the salt water, and your heart rate is up a bit and stuff. So we generally sort of take the first part of the bike reasonably easy. You're getting out of town anyway, so there's lots of roundabouts and traffic lights, but that allows just your body to sort of get into using your legs rather than your arms.
Yeah, settle into it. So you're actually, there's no roadblocks. You're sharing the road with traffic.
Yeah. It's completely open course. The whole route, because obviously you're out there, and the fields spread across several hours. So there's no way that they can manage that. But you do have a support vehicle that roughly follows you. They sort of bunny hop around you, so that just keep an eye on where you are, and
Right.
Obviously meet up to give you more food and things like that.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel after day one, and then how was it going into day two, body wise?
As I mentioned at the beginning, I felt amazing after day one. I'd really enjoyed the swim. The bike was just, we'd absolutely nailed exactly how we wanted to do that. So while I came out the swim 10 or so minutes ahead of the leader, we'd actually overtaken one and closed that gap to 40 seconds, I think it was. Not knowing that until I'd actually finished. But yeah, I felt great in my body. I felt like I was ready for the next day. We hadn't overdone things, and obviously a nice a nice surprise to be sitting second but the guy behind me was only another 30 seconds back, so it was really tight at the top. Day two is definitely the hardest day for me. It's a long day on the bike. You start, it's a really nice start. We start in a sort of peloton, so it's lined up a bit like a Formula One grid, And because myself and one other had the fastest sort of bike times for the day before, we were on the front, and they line them up in terms of your bike time from the day before. And you get a police escort out of town. So the first 10Ks, although everybody's asleep because it's 5:30 in the morning, you sort of can cruise out for the first, it's not quite 10Ks, but they take you out of town to a roundabout, and then they let us go. And because they're quite sort of small roads, none of the crews are allowed in there. So it's just the riders on the first 50 kilometers of the course. So felt good starting that, and it was really nice, but my front brakes were rubbing, so it felt like the first 60 kilometers of the ride I'd done with my brakes on.
Why was that?
I didn't really realize it until we got to the first hill. I know, just the screw had been sort of tightened up a bit too tight, and so the brakes were just rubbing on the front wheel, and because the plan we had was just to build power over time, I didn't really notice, but it was evident that my brakes have been rubbing for those couple hours of the ride, which is not ideal. But yeah, it's a long day in the saddle, and it's quite hilly. It's some beautiful scenery, but you're sort of working hard the whole time, and there's some definite really sort of dark times, even though you've got lots of crews around you being really supportive and stuff. I there's points where you just really struggle, and you're like, not so much I'm never going to be able to do this, but just the sheer effort it was taking to do it. Definitely found that really, really tough.
Effort physically or mentally?
Both. Definitely both. You there was points where you felt so tired, but then sort of mentally, there's lots of reasons I'm doing this, and you from a mental perspective, these sort of demons start to come in and play, and it's quite hard to sort of snap out of it a bit and find a happy place.
Yeah. And how long had you to go when these demons were coming out?
It wasn't long after halfway, I have to say. Yeah, it was. So there's a sort of about 140 kilometers in. There's a kind of turnaround, and you're just in the middle of nowhere. You're a long way from home. There's a bit of headwind. There's a bit of rain coming in. Your legs are hurting. Your arms are hurting. You don't want to eat anything anymore, but you have to. And you just sort of question, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But you've put all the effort in, and you're trying to just keep pushing.
What were you telling yourself? Because our pre-race interview, you said you weren't producing any blockbuster movies, but you would do little things like count to 100 just to get you through. So was there anything in particular that came up for you that helped you pass the time?
A lot of it actually was, there was those little things, just trying to change something, like just concentrate on a particular, like my cycle, my stroke rate, or my position, or something like that, just to sort of change, to have a concentrate on something. But a lot of it was actually thinking about the reasons I was doing it, as to some of those people that I'd worked so hard for, and people that had put a lot of money to support me and those causes. And whilst that probably brought on the tears a little bit, it actually sort of just motivated you and gave you a little boost to sort of just carry on and get to the next top of the next hill.
Yeah. And when you finally saw that finish line
On day two,
on
yeah,
day two?
yeah, it was relief, like
Yeah.
serious relief. It was, you know, when you've got sort of 10 kilometers to go, that you can almost sort of roll in, but you sort of keep pushing. But that last, you actually finish just before the finish shoot, so you've got you got a minute or two to gather your thoughts. But I had this one of the charities I'm supporting is the children's sort of cancer charity, and we've got a friend whose son is going through the second sort of cancer challenge. He's 7 or 8, and they live down in the Gold Coast, and I didn't know about it. They turned up at the finish.
Oh.
So I was in bits. I was in absolute bits when I came across the line, but just finished sort of mentally, completely done. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you then recover that evening to make sure that you showed up day 3 feeling good?
Yeah, so you finish much later on day 2, so there's actually a lot less time, albeit a reasonable amount. But other than eating, drinking, and trying to rest as much, I got a massage, got an ice bath, that sort of thing. It's really just about getting the legs as fresh as possible for day 2. So yeah, we just took it easy. There's a lot less to arrange for day 2 because it's, I say, just a run, but for the crew wise,
Day 3.
It's day 3. Yeah, the crew wise is a little less to deal with, but yeah, we just got the food in, kept drinking. Your whole mouth and system just feels weird because you've been on all this weird stuff for 2 days by then. So it's just it's a bit of a war of forcing stuff in, and there's not much enjoyment in any
eating.
Yeah, no.
It sounds awful. That's where I get most of my joy.
Absolutely.
So tell us about day 3. I mean, 84 plus kilometers followed by, those first 2 days. Just, I mean, sounds insane. How on earth do you prepare your mind to get through that after coming off day 2, which has been really challenging?
Other than I'd had a bit of a problem with the leg sort of leading into this, so there was a bit of intrepidation about that as well, and I could feel it on the bike a little bit. So really mindset wise, it was kind of, this is the last day, although it's just 84 kilometers, which I've never run. All you got to do is just get one foot in front of the other, and reasonably confident that even if it went really wrong, I'd be able to get to the finish in the time limit. So it was a case of go out there, enjoy it, and just assess the day as it unfolds, because I was pretty certain that I wouldn't get through the whole day without some sort of pain in the leg. But I'm enjoying it. I was enjoying the running at the time, and like I said, the rain sort of added an extra sort of interesting, more adventure to it. It just wasn't just another sunny run down the coast. There's a fair few painkillers being taken.
During or after, or both?
No, during, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a fantastic crew around me that when I was looking a little bit sorry for myself, would jump out and run along with us and start force feeding us again.
Yes, so you were allowed to have your crew, one of them, run alongside of you. Did that happen a lot throughout? Like, was there any plan for that, or just when you were looking down and out, they'd jump out?
There was a loose plan, certainly for the end, the last 15 Ks. One, you had to have one for the last 10 Ks. It's coming back into town. from a safety perspective, obviously we've been running for that period of time, and not losing people. And other than that, there's a couple of places where we kind of go off the road and down boardwalks and stuff for quite a while. So Pete would jump out and run those with us. So we had a bit of nutrition and things like that. But other than that, it was kind of as required.
When you look back over your preparation for this, are you really happy with how it all went? Or, looking back over the 3 days, are there things that you might have changed or could do differently?
We started working with Richard in January, so it's only 4 months away. We probably should have started earlier, I think is one thing. Although we'd kind of been training for Ironman and stuff up to December, the specifics of Ultraman are quite different, and obviously his coaching style. But we kind of just adopted what he sort of trusted the coach from day one, although it sort of felt different. I think I really enjoyed sort of learning from Richard and his sort of theories around things. So I wouldn't change much about the approach in that 4 months, other than maybe starting a bit earlier. But that's probably always the case. If you've got more time, then you should use it. I try not to beat myself up about I'm pretty certain the leg issue arose because I tried to get a slightly more comfortable saddle position a bit late in the day. So I but that's hindsight's a beautiful thing. And at the time I was saying, well, if I don't try to fix it, I'll always be wondering whether it could have been better. So it's that mix between saying you tried to fix it or
wondering,
or not, and living with how it was. And so that's the only slight thing, but it didn't,
and not have the brakes on.
Don't put the brakes. Don't tighten the brakes too much. But other than that, I don't think there's much more. There's not much I would change, and really.
At the next one.
I think. No.
Too soon to talk about that.
Too soon. Okay. People do sort of say, "Oh well, you nearly got it. You could win that thing," and it's definitely too soon to think about it because I had some pretty big reasons to do this, and it was intriguing to do it, and I loved doing it, and I've done it. But at the moment, I'm not really sure that I'd want to do another one straight away. I'd happily crew. I think being part of it from that perspective, I think that would be an amazing experience to crew for somebody and help somebody through that. But at the moment, I've done that, and we've got to go and find a new bigger adventure, maybe.
Oh, bigger, big call. What have you learnt about yourself throughout this process?
The one interesting one is you think you're quite good at it, but relying on other people, or I tend to sort of want to do a lot of things myself, but sort of letting, and probably people don't actually notice that too much, but letting go and letting others sort of make decisions for you and just accepting it, knowing that they're doing the right thing for you. That was certainly a lesson for me. Other than, like, it's insane. Like I said, there's some really dark times on day 2, but it was still 280 kilometers and 8 something hours out there, and I felt good enough to go and run 84 kilometers the next day. And that's mind-blowing that you can do that and put yourself into somewhere that you just think you've had enough, but actually very quickly you come back to a place where you think, oh, I feel all right, yeah, let's go. So there's definitely, going into endurance events that that's what it's about, but to actually have gone through it and realize that the body and mind it will just keep going until you decide that it's time to stop.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, that's key, isn't it? When you decide, because ultimately it's your choice, and you will bounce back.
Yep.
You've always
Exactly.
got. It's incredible how much, I guess, potential we have that we don't realize because we quit too early.
Yep. Yep. Oh, completely.
What have you enjoyed about this entire journey?
The friendship, the camaraderie around it. I think it just reinforces that this sport, whilst it's an individual sport, that everybody's supporting everybody the whole time. So that's just been amazing, and that's like we set up a group, and like there's hundreds of people out there sort of following what we're doing, and you've got no idea while you're doing it, and they're from all over the world, and you get some lovely messages in terms of either how it's inspired them to go and get out and do something or whatever. So that's been amazing. And just, I mean, just I guess putting your body through that is a strange one. It's sort of like, that's why we do this stuff, is to challenge ourselves, and I really enjoy sort of being there and being in the moment and sort of feeling that, and it's a safe environment. And that's the thing, is I'm not in the middle of the Sahara Desert or the jungle somewhere where actually my life's on the line, but you're putting your body to the limit, and you feel alive.
Sensational. And backing it up day after day.
Yeah.
So good. Julian, you are raising funds. Did you want to talk a bit about the charity and that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I set up a My Cause page because I've actually got 4 causes that I wanted to support, and they all link to something in my life. So the first one was a charity that my mum actually set up in East Africa in the 80s, which is about palliative care to Kenyans, rural Kenyans, as well as those in cities, either through cancer or AIDS, but providing that sort of, and their sort of tagline is to put life into their days rather than days into their life. So I was keen to sort of, they're still going strong and doing some amazing work, and relates to my mum, who's no longer with us, and obviously Kenya, where I grew up. The second is a charity which I started working with a lady here in Adelaide last year, called Into Ed Africa, and she set up 2 schools in Kenya, in some of the slums, and that's really around, obviously, getting education to kids, but it's more, that's just one project around, I say purposeful enterprise, but giving people the opportunity to be enterprising in themselves, and make something of their situation. So we've got a number of exciting projects which hopefully some of these funds will come to support, including sort of closing the digital divide out in East Africa. So teaching kids and adults to use technology, and how that might be able to support them. The third I mentioned earlier is around a children's cancer fund, and supporting kids who've had cancer and clearly, obviously, don't get much of a childhood. So it's really about putting the fun back into their childhood when they've got some really tough challenges, where it's just stuff that you shouldn't have to go through as a kid. And obviously, as families are supporting that, there's a couple of people in my life, certainly when we're in Sweden and here, that we've seen go through that. So that was the third. And the fourth is an organisation over in Ipswich in New South Wales, and it's a guy who set up an organisation called Healing with Horsemanship. So it's using horsemanship or animals to support mental health and PTSD, and so people work with horses and animals and really build a connection that helps them work through that sort of mental challenges, whether it's war veterans or people who've got mental challenges that they're dealing with, and putting a bit more back into their lives. A bit of a span, but they're all things that are related to either work I've done or places I've been. So it's not just one great weekend in Noosa. I think that we'll hear the benefits of that over the coming weeks and months and years.
Yeah, wonderful. And we'll put all of those links in the show notes for anyone who wants to help support that as well.
Lovely, thank you.
Julian, congratulations again, and thank you for sharing your journey with us. I've had the pleasure of not just working with you, but also watching, those 3 days as well. And it's been so incredible. I'm in awe of you and Tessa, and congratulations.
Yeah, thanks very much. No, it's been everything we or certainly I hoped for, and I thank you very much for having us on to talk about it. It's been lovely.
That was Julian's post-race recap. Now let's head over to Tessa Moorfield. We spoke 7 days post-race, and this is what Tessa had to say about Ultraman. Tessa, congratulations on completing Ultraman. How do you feel?
Thank you, Jackie. I feel pretty good right now. I feel like I've recovered and feel, obviously really happy with how the event went.
Yeah, how the event went. You were second overall female. When you look back on that, how do you what goes through your mind when you hear that?
I was so surprised on the last night after I finished the run day. I was feeling pretty unwell, so I was lying down recovering, and Karen, my team captain, was checking results, and she said, "I think you're the second female." And I said, No, it's just because everyone hasn't crossed the line yet. It can't be true."
Oh, wow.
So I was and still am very surprised by that.
That's a sensational effort. When you look back on this entire journey, what goes through your mind?
At the moment, it kind of feels like I imagined it. It's really hard to go back to the event itself, and it's hard. I really can't believe it happened, but I'm very proud and really happy with how the event went. It really was. It was one of the best things I've ever done.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, let's go back and relive some of it.
Okay.
Tell us about day 3 firstly, and crossing that finish line, because both you and Julian pre-event both said that you were both looking forward to day 3 the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did it live up to the expectations? What do you remember from it?
It absolutely lived up to expectations. I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but one of the most important things to me about this event was imagining running with my daughters. And they both ran with me, and they were so encouraging, and running along with them was just, I was so happy. It was just, it's hard to describe it. It was just incredible running with them. So I got to run with my daughters, both of them during the race, and obviously we crossed the finish line together. And my support crew took turns filling the rest of the kilometres, and I think they covered the entire 84 kilometres with me, apart from the first 4 or 5 kilometres that the crew weren't allowed to join you for. So I was pretty lucky. I had support for, let's call it, the whole race. And they were some of my favourite people. So I was surrounded by people who, you know, couldn't have wished for better people to be with me for that day. So yeah, it absolutely lived up to expectations. And then crossing the finish line, well, taking a few steps back, running down the beach with my family, my entire crew, that also absolutely lived up to expectations. It was amazing. So we did that last stretch down the beach and then ran up the soft sand to the finish line, and yeah, it was awesome.
I get emotionally thinking about it, hearing about it.
Yeah, me too.
What were you like when you crossed the line? Was there relief? Was there joy? Like, I mean, there must be so many emotions.
Oh, it's hard to remember right now. Yes, there must have been relief, because it was, as much as the day lived up to my dreams, it was a very tough day. And there wasn't much left in the tank when I crossed the finish line, if anything. But it was very satisfying crossing that finish line.
Yeah, and day 3 looked like the toughest in terms of rain and everything that was happening.
Yeah.
You know, with floods as well. How did you manage that, both physically and mentally?
I actually really didn't even think about it much, which is weird to say. I think my coach, Richard Thompson, prepared me really well with some things to focus on. And one of them was just to stay present and to not judge anything as being good or bad. It just is what it is. And I think that's how I felt about the weather. It just was what it was. And actually, even though it was challenging and it probably meant for, I suppose, slower times on the run, it was kind of fun. There was puddles everywhere, and there were parts where we were running through knee-deep water. Yeah. And there was one part, must have been around about 70 kilometres in, where there was, I guess it was an overflowing creek. So it was fairly fast flowing water, and we ran through that. It was so much fun.
That's brilliant. What a great advice to just accept what is.
Yeah, it really was. It was a game changer, I think, in terms of maybe performance, I don't know, but certainly the way I enjoyed the event. Just constantly reminding myself of that made such a difference.
Absolutely. And during the run, when you were getting, you know, your daughters are running with you and interchanging, what was there anything said during those moments, like, you know, running alongside your daughters?
They were just so positive. I can't remember what exactly they said. They were really positive. They were full of energy. They were happy to be supporting me, and they were like that from what I could tell for the entire 3 days. I'm sure it was, you know, they were long days, and I'm sure there were patches in the car of mood shifts that I didn't see, but from everything that I saw, they were really encouraging. So yeah, it was just their positivity, I think, that made its mark for me.
Beautiful. Well, let's go to day 1. Talk us through the swim, because again, pre-race you spoke about having a bit of anxiety with the swimming and having seen a psychologist. How did you go in the water?
Really well. There was a bit of background to that, I suppose. When I got to Noosa, the swell was quite big, and the ocean at Noosa Main Beach was not what I was accustomed to seeing for Noosa Main Beach. But I met the person who eventually offered, or almost straight away offered, to be my paddler. And we did a couple of practice swims with her paddling alongside me, and she was awesome. She calmed my nerves. We went out firstly in really, really tough conditions, and I knew I could do it after that. And then we went out on another day and did another part of the course, the swim course. So there was a bit of preparation in that, preparing for the worst conditions. And then on the race day, the conditions actually were pretty good. So that was a relief. But again, I was trying to stay present and not let myself worry too much about what the conditions were. I knew going into it that I'd be able to cope if they were really tough. And so what the psychologist had taught me about anxiety with the swim and I suppose in other aspects of life was that really it just comes down to breathing out carbon dioxide, so focusing on breathing out. So I had that tool as well. But the other thing that really helped that and having the practice swims in the bag with Joe was focusing on being grateful that I was able to do it. And that was another bit of advice that Richard impressed on me, was to just be grateful and remind myself that it was a privilege to be doing this, and that I was doing it with someone alongside me taking care of me, and there were the surf lifesavers out on the IRB, and just to be grateful for that. So that all of that meant that I actually had a really enjoyable swim.
Beautiful. So when you came out of the water and into that bike transition, how did all of that go?
Transition, I think, went fairly well. I had low expectations for transition in the sense that I wasn't too concerned with getting in and out in, I think it was 40 seconds or something. The first person came out of transition. I suspect my transition was more like 15 minutes. I haven't checked. But we got everything done that we needed to get done. And then it was on the bike, and straight away I had a problem. My power meter wasn't working on my bike, and my race plan was focused on power targets, and that rattled me. We tried to fix it, but we couldn't fix it. So that was one thing that came up that I suppose was a hurdle for the weekend. And again, for day two, the power meter didn't work. So we had to just shift the focus back to perceived effort. And that was how both day one and day two bike played out.
Wow. So how did you then go, especially for day two, when it's so much longer? I mean, perceived effort, you can hear sometimes that, athletes can feel really good and then be like, yeah, let's keep going at this pace. And sometimes it is actually a bit too far. So how did that go for you? And did that play on your mind?
It played on my mind, definitely. So after day one, that night the crew tried to fix the power, and we thought they'd fixed it. So I went into day two thinking, it's okay, we're going to have power, and it didn't work again. But Richard immediately shifted the focus back to perceived effort, which apparently it went well. It's hard for me I'm not absolutely sure, or I'm not entirely confident in my ability to go by perceived effort on the bike. If I had to do that with running, I'd be absolutely fine, but the bike's trickier for me. But I had Richard constantly checking my distance against time, against his, I suppose, targets. So he was constantly checking in that I was going to be okay to make cutoff, which was my big concern, and ended up getting in 70 minutes before cutoff. So something went right.
Yeah, wow. And were you worried about that throughout? Like did you have contact with Richard? Was he, able to say
Through
you're on the projected
through
time, you'll be fine?
yeah, via Karen, the team captain.
Yeah.
So she was talking with him. I wasn't talking with him. Day one, it was on my mind a lot, and I probably could have, in hindsight, shifted my mindset to be more positive about that and let it go. By day two, when the power didn't work, I found it was okay. It just is what it is. Move on. And I consciously thought to myself at the beginning, when I noticed it wasn't working, power meter is dead to me. There's no more need for it. Now moving on. And I did. So day two, I was able to just put that behind me and focus on just riding.
So at the end of day two, or even now in hindsight, because you didn't have that power meter, because you went on perceived effort, when you finished day two, do you feel like that was true to how you would have gone, or do you feel like you could have gone harder? Like, is there any thought around that when you look back?
No, I haven't actually really thought about that. I was just so relieved to finish it within cutoff, and actually quite a lot better than just within cutoff. I was pushing really hard by the end. I don't think I had anything left. I guess we'll never know. Without power, I don't have. No one can really assess it. It's just goes by how I feel. So I think I had used everything I had by the end. It was a really long way. I don't think I'll ever ride that far again. And I felt pretty tired by the end of it.
Yeah, well, tell us about that. How did you manage your recovery, especially then to follow up day three with, 85 kilometers of running?
So recovery was, as soon as I finished, it was after we're through the medical, it was straight into an ice bath for a little bit. They had big garbage bins basically full of iced water for us to jump into. And then we made the decision each day to just get straight home and get straight into recovery at home rather than waiting around for the massage therapist that they had there. So straight home, shower, compression tights. And then for me, it was pretty much onto the couch with my feet up while my wonderful crew did absolutely everything around me. And then I suppose there was also recovery food, so recovery shake straight after finishing. And the other thing that I questioned, but now I think it was great advice, Richard had me going out for recovery walks, short walks, 5 or 10 minute walks in the evening and the morning, which I questioned at the time because there's so little time when you're doing back-to-back days and you're an athlete who takes up a lot of that 12-hour chunk in the race day. There's not a lot of time for getting everything done that you need to do before you're up and racing again the next morning. But I went out and did these walks, and I think they were probably one of the key parts of recovery in hindsight.
Did you do those by yourself?
Yes, that was not only about, I guess, getting a bit of blood flow going and just moving, but also about having a little bit of time just completely to myself.
Yeah.
So, and it was good. I encourage anyone doing the event to build that into their program. Worked well.
Yeah. When you look back on the preparation that you did for it and how you went over the 3 days, is there anything that you think you could have done differently or that you'd maybe change going into it at the next one?
No, there will not be another one.
No, that's it.
Absolutely no way. No, actually, I think for me and for my goals and one of my goals being for the preparation to fit within the family life, I don't think there's anything I would have changed. It was probably the training that we did and the preparation that we did was maybe on the lighter side of what some do. But we were able to finish the event and to finish fairly well. So I think that proves that was enough. And any more than that, and it might not have worked in the family, balance with family. So no.
Perfect. And you mentioned before, obviously, you're, after the days you're relaxing and trying to recover, and your team are around you doing all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pick your team?
Well, so obviously my family was always a part of the dream to be my team. As soon as I mentioned to my good friend Karen Ross that I wanted to do Ultraman, she said, I'll be your support crew. And she never wavered from that, which I feel incredibly lucky about, because going into something like this, you think, how am I going to find people who are willing to do what's required to support you for an event like this? So Karen had her hand up straight away, and she had my back for everything right up to and during the event. And then as we got a little closer to the event, another really good friend, Pete Durand, offered to also be part of the support crew, which felt like the icing on the cake, really. That then I just felt like I had the perfect team. I was surrounded by my family, two of my really good friends, some of my favorite people. And also, luckily, they all really had the right kind of skill set to complement what we needed.
Tell us about the skill set and I guess when you look at overarching goal, yes, you want to complete it, but you want to complete it to the best of your ability. And like you said, having the right people with the right skill set, because these are like 14-hour days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Longer,
really.
Well, how do you sit with them and go, these are the jobs, these are how they need to be done, so to speak?
It was pretty easy, actually. So the kids obviously were motivators, and they were happy to take on some other roles like photography and videography and doing my hair in the evenings and that kind of thing. And my husband, I'd always dreamt of doing the last sort of 10 or 12 kilometers of the run with him. So that was something that I asked him to do fairly early on. But he seemed like the best choice to be the driver, navigator. And Karen, as team captain, she always knew the right thing to say. It was amazing. Every stop, she just said exactly what I needed to hear. So as a motivator, she was perfect. She was great at relaying information, communicating with Richard, and kind of managing all things logistical. And Pete's great with bike mechanics, and all of the nerdy sort of sports science information and nutrition. He was on top of all of that. So he managed my nutrition intake and kept tabs on that. So yeah, everyone had pretty clear roles, I think, that they were suited to and that they were happy to be a part of.
Is there a moment that stands out to you in which Karen said something that helped you get through some stage?
Oh my gosh. It was about, I might get this distance wrong. It was all a bit of a haze. On run day 3, she relayed to me, it's time to get ugly. It was about 60 kilometers to go, I think. Time to get ugly. And that I just kept telling myself that. It already was ugly, I think. But
And that just meant go hard?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just all out.
Legend. Oh, brilliant. What have you learned about yourself throughout this entire process?
I think I learned a lot of the lessons, the things that I've already spoken about. Probably being reminding myself more often to be grateful, and to remind myself generally with things that I do that it is a privilege to be able to do what I do, and learning the lesson firsthand about how beneficial staying present can be. I'm sure that's something that we all we all benefit from focusing more on that. But I'd like to make sure I focus more on that in future. So practicing that for this event and seeing how positive an influence that can have is something that I'll take away from the event.
And what about the belief in yourself around, because
Yeah.
you said that the bike was the most challenging. Now that you've done so much on the bike,
Yeah.
hours and hours worth, how do you feel about that?
Well, obviously, I'm really proud of how I was able to do the bike. But yeah, I don't think I'll be signing up for any really long bike races in the future. I think that was a one-off. Yeah, I think that's enough of that distance.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I was able to do it, and yes, you take away confidence from being able to do it. I don't think it means I want to do something that long again.
Yeah, that's
certainly
fair.
the running though. The running, it surprised myself by really enjoying the 84-kilometer run. I think I'd consider doing longer runs in the future.
Yeah, amazing. And what did you, I mean, obviously you have spoken about what you enjoyed, but let's go there again. What have you enjoyed about the entire journey?
I've really enjoyed all of the preparation that goes into this. It's huge, and it requires a fair amount of dedication, but I've really enjoyed understanding what preparation goes into it, acting on it, and seeing how that preparation pays off. So yeah, the planning side of it has actually been really interesting and fun as well.
That's fantastic. That's actually something that Richard has said about his process as well, is actually enjoying that process and the planning and discovering, those limits and shooting beyond.
Yeah.
Tessa, you're amazing. Congratulations on becoming an Ultraman. I've watched from my phone as I look at everything that's happening with your videographers posting onto
they did
the
well,
Facebook.
didn't they?
They did very well. Oh, some excellent footage there, and it really gave you a great idea of not so much what you experienced, because I'll never be able to imagine that, but certainly how difficult it was. Looking from afar. You're awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was Tessa and Julian. What an incredible story for the both of them. It was such an honor to be able to be a part of their journey, even if it was a little part. Nonetheless, it was so fantastic to get an insight as to how they're training, how they're feeling, and their mindset going into it, and then to obviously see them go throughout the events. Had special access to their Facebook group where I did get to see what the days looked like for them and them coming in through the finish shoots. It was very awesome. They've done so incredible, and it's been such a privilege to work with them and to watch their entire journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and leave a review, because everything counts to this little podcast and to keep it going strong. Thank you so much for tuning in today. You are awesome, my friend. Have a great day, week, month, and year. And here is to a world of bodies built better.